I'm Evelynn, and I'm easy enough to find online. My Twitter handle is just @Evelynn O'Connor. And I apologise in advance, there's lots of screen grabs of Twitter in my presentation, and that's just because for me, Twitter online, it's like a train station, and you can get anywhere you want to go from there, and you never really know where you're going to end up. I was honoured and terrified in equal measure when I was asked to do one of the keynotes for this conference. So I brought cake, as he mentioned, as a distraction tactic, because everybody loves cake. And my plan is to give it out at the end, so no matter how badly this goes, your last memory will be of cake. So when you enter the online space, there is a cacophony of global voices on every topic imaginable. For me, it was coming to this conference 3 years ago, it was my first ever EdTech conference, that encouraged me to tune in to the many voices online that had something to say, something passionate to say about education. And suddenly I gained access to perspectives on every aspect of how and why we educate future generations. Perspectives from all over the world, and that felt like a privilege, and it felt overwhelming. It feels like a privilege because as educators, for so long, it's been almost impossible to show people what it is that we do. Teaching happens mostly behind closed doors. It's like a secret kingdom the public only have access to via anecdote. But once you start blogging and tweeting and taking part in online discussions, suddenly you get these other voices communicating with you and challenging you, questioning you and complimenting you, and you become part of an energizing dialogue that honestly feels like reclaiming your professional identity. Listening to and learning from global voices is an incredibly powerful thing, and writing this keynote made me think about the enormous benefits of engaging with other educators online. So there are lots of benefits, such as people sharing loads and loads of teaching resources, obviously. There's lots of talk about collaboration between teachers and students, and for the students amongst themselves. I'm constantly being exposed to new ideas I've never heard of before. So one was unschooling. I didn't know what that was a year ago, and now I've read a book on it. And by far away, the greatest benefit of tuning into these global voices are the deep and varied discussions of pedagogy which happen online. Sometimes, but probably not often enough, with links to relevant research. There's the buzz of having people read and respond to things that you've written, which is, I guess I'm an English teacher, so I find that kind of exciting. Plus there's the odd vital reminder that some of the things people claim about educational change are just completely ridiculous. I really like this one. Books will soon be obsolete in schools. Our school system will be completely changed in 10 years. And that was Thomas Edison in 1913. I think it's important to bear this in mind if we want to prove to people that the virtual teacher is not the same as a real teacher, that there's more about teaching than shoveling content into students' heads. But all of this being said, there's no doubt that educators in particular are exploring and exploiting the possibilities that the online space provides to connect and to communicate and to collaborate, possibly more than any other profession. I don't know if you saw this during the week, but there's kind of a bit of a buzz going on in Twitter at the moment because they've said that out of the 500 million tweets that are posted every day, 4.2 million of them are related to education. And it says, to put this in perspective, while you read this past sentence, over 3,000 education-related tweets have flown across the Twitterverse. So I think we are doing something noteworthy, something different as educators. Having said all this, there is a complexity here, here's a crying baby, that we shouldn't skim over or deny, because the cacophony of global voices, it can feel overwhelming at times, and it's because of the sheer volume of inputs. You've got Twitter and blogs and SlideShare and Google Hangouts, you've got conferences and podcasts and discussion forums, and at times that turns this glorious symphony into a kind of a fiendish babble that it's difficult to make sense of. And this is where I should have showed you the crying baby, because I think that with patience, You become like a new parent who can tune into the cries of their child. So one cry means I'm hungry, and one cry means I'm tired, and one means, why is that scary man making faces at me? Maybe he wants cake, I don't know. So how do we decide which cries are worth listening to and which ones we're better off tuning out? So I've kind of arbitrarily divided these voices into 4 categories: automated, agitators, advocates, and authentic voices. Okay, the automated voices are just spitting out content. And I don't know about you, but when I was a child, I was told it's very rude to spit. Luckily, I'm far enough back that I'm not going to land anything on anyone over there. Perhaps I was really naive, but I didn't realize until recently that a Twitter feed can be automated. So you can run a program that searches for keywords on a particular topic. So let's say education, edtech, pedagogy. And the program will then spit tweets out from your account with links to this content. And I found this out because I met a guy who I thought was a prolific tweeter, and I passed a comment to him about how much he tweeted, something very naive along the lines of, how the hell do you post a new tweet every 4 minutes? And he laughed at me, which is fair enough, and he replied, oh, it's not me, it's just an algorithm. And he offered to show me how to do it, and he told me it had gained him 20,000 followers, and it had helped him to get a job he really wanted with an educational publisher. And if you could have seen my face in that moment, I felt like someone had slapped me. And that realization, that awareness that people can seem authentic online but not be, it seems so obvious to me now. But at the time, it was a total bombshell. So I guess what I'm saying is that figuring out the robots from reality is really important for us and for our students. There are also lots of agitators online who are completely entrenched in a particular viewpoint on education and who refuse to be moved. So it's following bloggers and tweeters in England mostly that has opened my eyes to the battle lines which are drawn between traditional and progressive education. Hardline traditionalists argue that the way we've always done things is just fine, thank you very much. And they ridicule many of the buzzwords we've been hearing in recent years, phrases like the flipped classroom, project-based learning, and student-centered methodologies. At the other end of the spectrum, these people would not allow me to stand here just talking to you, you have progressive education devotees who view direct instruction as the devil and whole class teaching as the spawn of Satan. And it's quite entertaining to sit on the sidelines observing these wars unfolding, but I think what you and I really need to do is find the people in the middle. Find the global voices who refuse this dichotomy, who refuse to simplistically equate progressive education with an anti-intellectual agenda, while also refusing the notion that the status quo is grand and nothing needs to change. The person I can wholeheartedly recommend that you read on this score is a guy called Tom Bennett, and specifically his book called Teacher Proof. And I'm not advertising for him, I don't know him, I've never met him. I don't think I've even had a conversation with him on Twitter, which is weird because I've been following him for years. But his is a global voice that I'd never have heard if it wasn't for the internet, even if we've never had an actual conversation. It's educators like him who can tolerate paradox, ambiguity, and complexity without their brains exploding that we need more of as we struggle to formulate the brave new world of teaching in the digital era without completely abandoning what is valuable in our current practice. So we're left with authentic voices and advocates. And I'll kind of ram the two of them together just because I don't have a lot of time. But if you want a quick acid test for recognizing authentic advocates as opposed to cheerleaders or self-promoters, what I came up with was this notion that there are 3 key features you'll notice in these people. The first one is, it's become a cliche, we all need to be reflective practitioners. But when you read their blog posts and when you speak to them, you realize that they're not afraid to do something and then see how it went and then try it again and then try it a different way and think about it and kind of play with it. And that's really, really good. The second thing you'll notice about them is that they don't only advertise their successes, They don't see themselves as advertising anything. They'll be honest with you about their failures, and there's something really refreshing about that. Because if we do a kind of a cheerleading dance, you know, it's so easy, yeah, that's really frustrating for people who are trying to integrate EdTech and obviously encountering some difficulties, some problems, some questions, some roadblocks, as all of us are. The final thing I recommend is that you meet them in person. Hello. The reason I think that that's so important is because I suppose in many ways we're all kind of hybrids of those four things that I mentioned, a kind of a complex mixture of automaton, an advocate, an agitator. So I might kind of joke about these online behaviours, but as a wise writer of an enormously popular, some would say work of fiction, once said, "Let he who has not sinned cast the first stone." There are definitely times when I advocate for a particular way of doing things in the classroom, or when I retweet a link without actually looking at the link, which is classic automaton behaviour, and I always feel guilty after doing it. And there are many times when I've been an agitator, questioning and challenging the minister and cutbacks and education reform. Sometimes I get it wrong, sometimes I change my mind, sometimes I can't make up my mind what I think about a particular issue. But as long as you and I, as long as we do our very best to remain authentic, then I think we're adding to the symphony of global voices rather than just the babble of noise. And meeting in person like we're doing today, it really helps us to connect and to project our real authentic self as a complement to the virtual self that we put out there online. Why then is any of this relevant to the students that we teach? Here's a few of them. Well, I said earlier on that as educators for so long, it's been almost impossible to show people what it is that we do. And now suddenly, it's really easy. But with the explosion of ways to communicate what we do online, there comes responsibility. And it's a responsibility I think we need to take very seriously. I had a student recently who entered a competition to write a scene from a play, and her script was highly commended, and I was really proud of her. And so I got a photo of her with her highly commended certificate. But when I mentioned putting the photo on the school Facebook page, she went pale, and then she asked me if I put a filter on it. And you'd be forgiven for thinking that she's really vain, but she's actually got pretty bad acne. And I think it's these kind of things we need to consider before publicising every move our students make online, because I don't think that that's something that they want. There's something liberating about the idea that sometimes, a lot of the time, what happens in the classroom stays in the classroom. You want students to trust that they can do and say anything, no matter how silly, and it won't end up online. It won't end up anywhere except as an anecdote at their 10-year school reunion. And perhaps it's because I teach teenagers, maybe the most self-conscious age there is. Maybe that's why I'm hypersensitive to this issue. I often see things online and I go, oh my God, my 15-year-old self would hate if that still existed somewhere. I've also got a student in second year who's an exceptionally talented writer, but she goes to great lengths not to draw attention to her intelligence. She's not comfortable with me reading her work to the rest of the class, which I respect, even if it makes me kind of sad. I spoke to her mum at the parent-teacher meetings about the beauty of her prose, and I also spoke to the student herself on the corridor quietly a few days later about maybe publishing something she had written. And she was surprised, because every time I tell her she's a good writer, she doesn't believe me. And she was chuffed, she was kind of chuffed, you know, she was happy for me to do it, but as long as her piece was anonymous. So I typed it up, and I published it on my blog. But afterwards, I really questioned myself. I wondered if maybe I should have created a blog for creative writing from our school and published it there instead. But I knew from experience that an obscure MSM writer's WordPress blog would get very few hits, because I had done this back in 2012. Whereas by publishing it on my website, I knew I could instantly get more people to read it, and it's had over 500 views to date. But then I started to think about it this way: if my website is making me money, even if it's only a very small amount, then there's an ethical dilemma here. I am genuinely so proud of my students' brilliance. But if publishing their work becomes a form of self-promotion for me as a teacher, that's problematic in many, many ways. Because the busier your blog is, the more often you get these kind of emails. Sponsored post, advertising opportunity, I stumbled upon your website, yada, 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 and we would like to sponsor an article on your site, etc., etc., and I've blocked out the name of the company, I didn't even reply to them. But maybe if I was desperately poor, maybe if I was on one of these 8-hour-a-week teaching contracts, maybe I would. I don't know. At a time when teaching contracts are becoming less and less secure, at a time when educators feel pressurized to justify our very existence because students are asking the question, well, I don't need a teacher when I got Google. At a time when data and league tables and PISA scores dominate and sometimes dictate policy and public debate about the role of education, we need to guard against the potential for our students to become pawns in a propaganda war. Publishing students' work can be really exciting for them and for you, but it's also tied up with the complex issue of self-esteem. If, for example, I only publish the top 10% of students in my class, the A students, what message does that send to the others about the value and the validity of their work? On the other hand, if I encourage students to publish work that's average, is there a danger that their teenage self will come back to haunt them in later life when they're looking for a job? It's interesting that Minister Cannon mentioned Yeats. I was doing Yeats with my students recently and talking about one facet of his biography that a lot of people aren't aware of is that he was a very mediocre student in school, even though he became one of the world's greatest writers. And if he could have had a blog when he was a teenager, I don't know if they ever would have got published. I don't know. But I'm really fascinated by this idea that, I have left my teenage self behind, and there's parts of her I miss, but there's parts of her I'm damn glad aren't available to anyone else. I think this issue of publishing students' work is a difficult one because there's something so exciting and invigorating about finding an audience beyond the classroom, beyond the teacher. So I think maybe we go with our gut on this one, but we also allow students to be selective about what goes into the public domain. And we use our common sense, if that's not as uncommon, hopefully, as sometimes people say it is. Anyway, I think at this point, you're probably ready for a bit of active learning. So if you've got your devices, we're going to finish up with me describing 3 projects I've undertaken with my class groups this year. And I'm going to set you a challenge in the form of a questionnaire. So I'm going to, if you bear with me, that's the link, but I'm going to tweet it, which is probably easier for people to just click on. So, tweet. Did that work? Hey, okay. You know you can save things to your drafts in your phone, but you can't access your drafts on your desktop. Did you know that? Maybe you can. Very strange. Okay, so what am I asking you to do? I've sent you the SurveyMonkey link, and if you're not on Twitter, the direct link is there, so just blah 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 surveymonkey.com/FBLLF, all caps 7P. I'm in total teacher mode now. This is wait time. Have I waited long enough? Yeah? We're good to go? All right. So your task is to assess each project under the following headings: creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. And I want you to grade them from 1 to 5. So 1 being the lowest score, it doesn't require a lot of creativity, collaboration, or critical thinking, and 5 being the highest. And I'm also offering a section for other comments if there's something else you'd like to add so that we can have a conversation, even though I appear to be doing a monologue. And I'll share the results of the survey with you later in the day. So songwriting has become a kind of a theme, accidentally, because I know Minister Cannon mentioned it earlier on. But the first project I'll describe is one I did with my Chan years. It started back in September. I told them we were going to do a spot of songwriting, and it was just kind of chancing my arm. It wasn't something I'd done very much of before. So I brought my guitar into class, which got a lot of looks when I was coming from the car, because I'm not a music teacher, I'm an English teacher. And then I played them a couple of songs that I'd written myself, and we spoke about tempo and rhythm and analysed some lyrics. I brought a keyboard and a second guitar down to the room, and then I said, off you go. And some of them embraced that, and some of them completely balked. But over time, the end result from a class of 22 students was 8 original songs, which we recorded and uploaded to SoundCloud. Some of them were listed as private, and some of them we left public, whatever the students were most comfortable with. We then entered the Bio Ireland Songwriting Competition at the very last minute, because we didn't hear about it till the last minute. So just before the closing date, we very hurriedly translated their favourite song into Irish, because it was a competition for an original song in Irish. We wrote, filmed and edited a video to accompany our entry, and we ended up winning second prize at the live finals in Killarney on Halloween night. So all I want you to do now, with the limited knowledge that I've provided you with, is to rank this activity under the headings of creativity, collaboration and critical thinking, and you can be as kind or as mean as you want, it doesn't matter because it's anonymous. Okay. Can I keep going? How's my wait time? I was really good at this, I walk around. Okay, I'll keep going. Right, so the second project I'd like you to kind of assess is, it's a Twitter project we did between Halloween and Christmas. We were reading the trial scene in the wonderful novel To Kill a Mockingbird, and I stole the Twitter idea from an English teacher called Fintan O'Mahony. The idea was to get each student in the class to tweet as one of the people at the trial, either the witnesses or the accused or the judge or the victim and so on. Over the course of 2.5 weeks, we tweeted our way through the trial as I read it aloud in class, with students responding to the evidence, integrating quotes in their tweets, challenging each other to defend their behaviour, and commenting on the events as they unfolded. So again, and I realise you've just got a very limited overview of what we were up to, but I'd like you to rank this activity under the 3 headings of creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. I'm sure they can cut the wait time out of the video. Although they probably shouldn't. Okay. The last project I'd like you to just have a quick, I'd like to just show you a little bit of. I'm hoping this video is going to work, it's embedded. Okay, so if you're ready, I'll play this. So just to let you know, World Book Day was in February, I think. And we had been sent loads and loads and loads of vouchers, where you get $1.50 off a book, or you can get a free book worth $1.50 if you have one of the vouchers, and nearly all the bookstores participate. But in previous years, we've just kind of gone around to the classes and handed out the vouchers, and usually you often found them like crumpled on the floor and stuff. It was just really demoralising for someone who loves reading. And so we tried this instead this year. All right, so I'd like you to rank this activity under the headings of creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking. And I'll give you a minute to do that, and I'll let you know the results later. How am I for time? Okay. All right. So, I'm hoping some of you are thinking, I don't have enough information. And if you are, you'd be right. And now I'm going to do that really annoying thing that you remember your teachers doing in school, where they tell you things you wish you had known before you wrote down your answers, when it's too late. Okay. What struck me powerfully about the World Book Day project was the extremely positive response it got online. I got so many messages saying how great it was, and the kids were buzzing about it for days afterwards. I shouldn't say kids, I should say students. Which is always a lovely experience, and I loved it, and I would do it again in a heartbeat, and it was definitely a way. There was nobody in the school that day who didn't know that it was World Book Day. But if you think about this from a learning perspective, weren't there lots of students who just had to sit on the floor and be filmed? Weren't there students whose brains didn't have to engage at all? They weren't even reading, they were just pretending to read. Sticking vouchers on the wall with blue tack, that doesn't sound to me like the kind of activity which drags you into the zone of proximal development where learning happens. It was what we did afterwards that mattered. Analysing and critiquing other flash mobs that we found online. Lamenting our bad camera work, because I don't know if you noticed, but we didn't get the reaction shots that are such a feature of this kind of video if you want it to go viral. We made a list of guidelines for creating a guerrilla advertising campaign, and then each and every student had to come up with their own concept for a flash mob, either individually or in pairs. That's where the learning happened. Not the flashbang wallop of the video we stuck on YouTube, but the follow-up work which demanded critical thinking from each and every student. And no, we didn't then go and make 27 videos of 27 different flash mobs, because honestly, they had learned what they needed to learn from the activity, and there was so much else to be learned. And of course I said, I'm really happy for you to do this in your own time, because they were kind of going, are we going to make 27 flash mobs now? And I was like, well, you should go and do this at the weekend, you'll have the crack. And they laughed, but none of them actually did. And that's okay too, because it's not about you or I or them making a million videos so we can show off on YouTube what great teachers we are. It's about our students achieving deep learning, and often this means applying what they've learned practically in a theoretical way. And what I came to kind of think was that it's in the intersection between the practical, the digital, and the theoretical that the deep learning happens. If I work backwards, okay. If I work backwards, then there were problems also with the Twitter project, where some of them said that it caused a kind of a cognitive dissonance because they were listening and tweeting at the same time. I'm going to skip a bit now because I'm running out of time. If I work backwards again, there were problems with the songwriting experiment because there were 22 students, but there were only 8 finished songs. And about 8 of the students, they kind of just wouldn't engage. I'm not going to ban collaboration next year, but some of the best songs emerge from students, because some of the best songs emerge from students working together. But I also know that despite the expectation that each individual identify and articulate their contribution in a really concrete way, some of them just said, I can't do it. Okay, so I'm just wondering how different your responses to the survey Monkey Link would be if I asked you to complete it again, or is it one of those things where you just have to be there, where the only honest, truly honest appraisal can come from the participants themselves? When I posted the World Book Day video, no one challenged me and said, yeah, but what did you do next? With the songwriting module, nobody said, but what about the students who didn't write a song? What did they do? With the Twitter project, nobody said, why would you ruin the experience of reading one of the greatest novels ever written by tweeting about it? And the message I took from this, the learning I took from this, was that if no one asks you these difficult questions, you must ask them of yourself. And so I did, and so I knew that I could pass off something that looks a lot like learning as learning. Or I could do the difficult thing, and I could ask my students to do the thing that they might resist, the thing that would stretch and challenge their brain, the thing that would help them to achieve deep learning. I think trying to ensure that each student achieves deep learning has always been our greatest challenge, and it will continue to be in the digital era. But if we can find the sweet spot between the practical, the digital, and the theoretical, then I believe the future looks bright. Thank you, and please have some fun.